How to Shade Eyes, Part 1 tutorial. So this week I decided to delve into a bit of a mini-series. It's going to be a 3-part mini-series on some of the different techniques that I use to shade eyes. So as you can see, I selected 3 different color palettes, and I'm starting with the first one on the very top. I'm selecting the base color, so I generally go with the lightest color as the base color, generally speaking. And once I've laid down the base color with the fill, I go ahead and open up a new layer and set it to multiply. Now right now, the idea is I'm going to create the pupil. So I'm still using the same base color, but the multiply darkens that pupil color. And then as you can see, I scroll out to see if the pupils are roughly about the same size. They're not, so I'm going to have to redo that one. Now, as you notice, a lot of my process tends to be experimentation. There is a style, though, I do like, and it does handle differently with different shades of eyes. But we'll go through that as we go exploring the next 2 palettes in the other 2 videos. So what I do is I move I move a new layer beneath the multiply layer, and I select a purple color. So the purple color is going to work as a shade color for me. And I like to lay that in behind the pupil that is set to multiply. I'm going to use the soft eraser and erase out the parts that I don't want. So that way there's a nice gradation from the pink to the purple. Again, I set to a new layer above the other multiply layer for the pupils and hit multiply again. Again, using the purple, and now switching to an airbrush tool, I am going to fill in some darker shade to get a bit of depth going in the eye itself. Now, as you can see, I'm selecting the blue. Now, at this point, I did a little bit of experimenting because I wasn't sure how I wanted to treat it. You're going to see me make a couple of mistakes because I wasn't ultimately satisfied. You can ignore these mistakes, or you can try them out yourself. So I was just experimenting to see how the soft light would be treated with the blue. For me, it didn't work the way I wanted it to, so I quickly ignored that. And then I created a new layer. And then I tried to erase and leave some blue highlights. Ultimately, I erased so much blue, there was no point having that blue there. So I restarted again. So I set that layer again to multiply. I kept the blue shade. And then I went darker, even over top of the pupil. Again, in all this adds some highlights, this adds some more techniques, and more shade contrast. Now create another layer and move it to above the multiply layer that has the blue. Again, I multiply, and yes, I do multiply a lot in a lot of the shades I do. I select the other blue version, and then what I'm starting to do is I'm going to use a paintbrush tool. I'm going to start filling in a line underneath the eyelid to give it some shade. Now do this for both eyes, and again, this is only one method of shading. Everybody has a different way of doing things. So now I create a new layer underneath the eye shade part. I hit soft light. And now I start drawing lines on either side of the color part of the eye. Next, so you get your soft erase tool, And what you do is you erase a little bit from the eyelid downwards to take away the highlight. Because it is shadowed, you don't want as much highlight in those areas as you do with other parts of the eye. And again, we repeat the process on the second eye. Again, do those lines. Now, just so you all know, it did take me a while to get comfortable to find a style that I liked. And even now, I don't have a set style. I treat each eye differently. This is just one method I use. And sometimes some of the eyes I do use the exact same method with very little variance. But again, I treat them all differently and approach them with all different aspects. So this is just one way, and again, just finishing those lines there. Then I'm going to take the soft erase tool and erase from the eyelid down. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes will happen as you're doing all this. As you can tell, there probably has been 1.5 million flubs in my video as it is. But, you know, I digress. We go forward and we try again. So now, after doing that, I create a new layer. And then we're going to go ahead and switch it to the soft light filter and select the white color. And I'm going to go into the lighter part of the eye, and we're going to start filling in. You notice how the white itself now intensifies that actual pink part of the eye and also overlays the pupil. I kind of like this because even though the pupils generally are dark, and yes, I rarely use black pupils, I like to have the contrasting of the different colors that come out. And next I'm going to create a new layer, take the blue and use a soft glow. This intensifies the eye glow in it. I just love the intensity that this gives. Again, don't have to, it's all personal preference. This is just what I tend to use. I'm going to create a new layer once more. So what I'm going to do is I'm in fact going to actually duplicate the layer for the pupil. And then I am going to take it and adjust the hue as well as any saturation to give it a little bit darker. Then with the soft erase brush, I'm going to go ahead and clear out the spot where I still want the pink to show versus the purple color that we created. And again, we do put this layer on multiply, keep it exactly the same as it was other than the changes to the coloration. Now you'll notice now that this gives a little more depth to the pupil by having the surrounding darkness around it. Now at this point, we can't forget the whites of the eye. Now, again, how I treat this will just vary. Right now I'm using a white, but it is normally better to use an off-white color. I can't tell you why I actually used the white this time, but I did, so this is what we're going with. Generally, I find using like an off tan or an off blue, like nearly white. Those tend to be the ones I like to use outside of the white itself. So we go ahead and do this for both the eyes. Put the white in. And sometimes it's difficult to fill in and make sure that you can maintain a eye type shape when you're just got no guidelines, but you do your best and you keep rolling with it. And next I go right back to the very top underneath the actual line work. I create a new layer. And then I'm going to take the darker blue / purple color. I'm going to hit multiply as the filter on that layer. And then I'm going to fill the entire eye with that color. Now you're probably wondering why I'm doing this. After all the work we put into the color part of the eye, well, you'll see. Because when you look at a human eye, we still look like we have shading in as we get further on the inside of the eye versus on the outside. So by doing this technique, I found this actually helps bring that depth and that wetness to the eye. So of course, don't forget, fix any bit of the shade that went over the line work. And then I'm going to take the soft erase tool and I'm going to work from the highlighted part of the eye and work my way outwards. We want the darkest part to remain in the edges of the eye, whereas the lightest part to shine the brightest. And then from there, I go ahead, still using the same color I did before, and we're going to lower the opacity on that layer that we just did. I'm going to add a new layer, hit multiply again, using the same color. I'm going to take my paintbrush tool and just draw a line over where the shaded part of the lid is. And we're going to do this for both eyes. And of course, you erase any mistakes you make and try to clean up the line a little bit so that it matches up with the eyelid shadow that you put on the main color of the eye already. And you do this for both eyes, obviously. Next, you're going to take your soft erase tool and you're going to erase a little bit of the edging, make it a little softer in from the inside of the eye inwards. Next, you're going to add a layer above the line art layer and select your color white. Time for the highlights, essentially. So I went ahead and I made a mistake and took my star tool too early. But normally I do this as a last step. Sometimes I don't do it at all. But in this case, I did take the star tool too early and I erased them and restart it. Normally I take my paintbrush tool and I lay down the blocked out white highlights. I normally do 2 dots and then a stroke, and I keep the highlights to the same per eye. And then I take the soft erase tool again and I erase a little bit of the inner highlight so it looks like a bit more of a reflection than just a solid white mass. Then I again add a new layer, take the star tool at its full opacity, and then add the shine to the highlights themselves. And that is, for the most part, how I actually do my eyes. Right now, I just decided to go ahead and embellish a little, add the skin tone, but for this tutorial, obviously that's not necessary. So this was all done in the Sketchbook by AutoDesk tool. I do have some favorite tools that I do use through this process. It's normally the ballpoint pen for my line work, set to the marker setting, the airbrush tool, but I do experiment, and I did experiment a little bit on this one with the flesh tones. Again, end of the day, it's just a matter of experimenting and finding what works for you. I'm hoping that this particular tutorial has helped in your creation of your art. And I will be doing 2 more tutorials based on the other 2 color palettes that you saw earlier in the video to show how the different color tones and all that can look in my particular style, or show you some of the variations as I adapt the style to the different color palettes. Not everything is the same, and art, if anything, is all about learning and growing. How I started doing eyes back in 2015 is entirely different than how I do them now. It has taken me at least 5 years to learn this technique, and I have no idea where the next 5 years will lead. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Don't be afraid to fail. The best thing about artistry is that it does not have to be perfect. Perfect and perfection is an illusion. Make mistakes. It's the only way you're going to learn as an artist. As you can tell, it's the only way I seem to know how to talk when I make these videos, because it is entirely on the fly and very difficult to do. But I don't script any of this, so when you hear the ums and the stutters, it's because I'm not perfect, And I don't want anyone thinking I'm perfect in any way, or that, this is like the uber perfection, because I am just like any artist. I have a beginning. I have evolved since that beginning, and I won't stop evolving. Some people may think I'm good now, but I want to be better than what I am now. And in 5 years, when I'm better than I am now, I want to be better than that point. Art is always about learning and evolving, and just practice, practice, practice. That is the key to all art, is just the practice. I hope you guys all enjoy. Have yourselves a good day and stay healthy and happy. Bye.